Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Mace. I'm coming to you from Canada. Today we're checking out what is the Council of the EU. I remember a few days ago we did a video on the EU and how laws are passed within the EU and how they are ratified and how they come to be. It was pretty interesting, and we kind of looked at the three branches of the EU, one of them being the Council of the EU, which, if my memory serves correct, was made up of like ministers from each country within the EU. I don't know how many ministers, if it was just one from each country or two, and then they would discuss and go over laws, come up with bills. I think that was sort of the gist. But yeah, let's watch the video for a refresher on that. It's interesting looking into the EU. I've never really looked into the details of how it works. It's interesting observing like people to the right, I would say, people to the right in North America, even if they hear the word EU, they're like, oh, the EU, bunch of bureaucrats trying to give laws to, like, they relate like the EU with all of their other conspiracy theories about globalization in the world and like the Illuminati, pretty much like it's that insane. But yeah, they'll like hear the EU and then be like, that's the World Economic Forum people, Klaus Schwab, they're trying to make you own nothing and you're gonna love it. Like, yeah, the internet, for all its benefits, is making people incredibly susceptible to stupidity, I would say. Anyways, let's check this out. Put on my trusty glasses so I can see. Let's go.
Did you know that the Council of the European Union is one of the most essential decision makers of the EU? This video will explore what the Council of the EU is, what it does, and finally, who controls it.
If it exists, it should be relatively important.
So what is the Council of the EU?
Yeah.
The Council is one of the two legislative institutions of the European Union. The other one being the European Parliament. They are co-legislators, both on equal footing regarding the lawmaking process. The Council of the EU is made up of national ministers from every member state of the EU.
Okay, so one national minister from every member state. And yeah, having checks and balances and different bodies within the EU is smart, obviously, to make it as like a democratic process as possible.
In theory, each policy area, for example agriculture, should have a total of 27 ministers, one from each member state. But as always, there are exceptions, but we will not get into those today.
Sweden?
These 27 ministers are then
Sweden?
responsible for passing laws in their respective areas. For example, trade, healthcare, transportation, or as before mentioned, agriculture. So what does the Council actually do? Well, it has four main roles. Firstly, the legislative role, where the Council plays a vital role alongside the European Parliament. However, the Council represents the interests of the member states as individuals, in contrast to the European Parliament, which represents the interests of the European citizenry as a whole. Think of it this way. The European Parliament is the voice of the EU citizens, while the Council of the European Union represents the governments of the member states. Both institutions work together closely to negotiate and adopt EU laws based on proposals from the European Commission. For example, if the EU wants to adopt a common migration policy, the Council would hold a series of meetings to negotiate the details of the proposal. During these meetings, the representatives of each member state...
Oh man, there's a lot of information coming at me. I feel like I'm watching episode 1 of Andor, Star Wars show I just watched last night. It was like, oh man, a lot of exposition, a lot of information. So... damn. I'm gonna go back a tiny bit. I got lost in the sauce.
However, the Council represents the interests of the member states as individuals,
right. Yeah.
In contrast to the European Parliament, which represents the interests of the European citizenry.
Okay, so the European Parliament represents the interests of the entirety of the EU, whereas the Council of the EU is more so member states based.
As a whole. Think of it this way. The European Parliament is the voice of the EU citizens, while the Council of the European Union represents the governments of the member states. Both institutions work together closely to negotiate and adopt EU laws based on proposals from the European Commission.
Okay, so the European Commission proposals come out and then they're negotiated and talked about and adapted, etc., between the Council and the European Parliament. The European Parliament is a body that kind of speaks for the citizenry as a whole, the European citizens. The Council of the EU, more so, is a representative of the governments of each member state country, and the ministers serve as the representatives of that government. Okay.
For example, if the EU wants to adopt a common migration policy, the Council would hold a series of meetings to negotiate the details of the proposal. During these meetings, the representatives of each member state would voice their concerns and ideas, and the Council would work to find a compromise that takes all of these perspectives into account.
It must be hard, right? 27 people in the room. I think anybody watching knows how difficult it can be to come to decisions and make sound decisions with such a large group of inputs. Like, it's
count. Secondly, the Council is responsible for coordinating the policies of EU member states. This means that ministers ensure that policies and actions of each individual member state are aligned and consistent with the policies of the EU as a whole. Thirdly, the Council is responsible for developing and implementing the EU's foreign and security policy, based on guidelines set by the European Council. Yes, the European Council is not the same as the Council of the European Union. It's very confusing, so make sure to watch my other video on the European Council. Nonetheless, a good example was Russia's initial invasion of Ukraine, where the European Council called for an immediate response, and the Council of the European Union developed and implemented multiple rounds of extensive sanctions. And lastly, there's the budgetary role, where the Council plays a key role in the adoption of the annual EU budget, working jointly with the European Parliament. So who controls the Council of the EU? The Council is led by the presidency from a different EU member state every 6 months. The role of the presidency includes setting out agendas for meetings and representing the institution at events such as international conferences or summits with other world leaders. The presidency also chairs meetings of ministers from each member state on specific policy issues, which are then voted upon before any decision can be made. In conclusion, the Council of the EU plays an important role within the EU, one that cannot be overlooked when considering how laws are passed or regulations are created across Europe's political landscape. This channel is all about the EU, so if you want more educational videos about institutions or EU current events...
I'll certainly watch more videos on the EU. I find it pretty fascinating. It's pretty staggering accomplishment, really, to get 27 member states all coming together for common goals and common good, and there's so many benefits to it. I'm sure there's negatives too, but I would think the benefits outweigh those. Free travel, working is easier, studying is easier, and just having all of that common goodwill, and we got your back, you got our back type of thing. So pretty interesting stuff. As a Canadian, it's like pretty foreign to us, right? Because we're a country where, like, we have allies. Like, it used to be the States. Apparently, with their current administration, it's been shaky, to say the least, and there's a lot of bitterness. Canadians are pissed off, basically, at the States and what the current administration has done, and kind of set back the relationship between the two countries, which historically has been incredibly close. But when you have a leader of the country consistently spewing rhetoric about Canada being the 51st state and we're going to annex them, economically take them over, and there'll be a great state, and calling the Prime Minister of Canada a governor, just like blatant disrespect. And of course his followers say, oh, he's playing 4D chess, he's so smart and amazing and wonderful, when really he's just a huckster, a charlatan, snake oil salesman, and failed businessman. All right, we'll see you all next time. Peace.